students. Good afternoon, good evening, whichever one it might be. This is Chapter 33.3, Emergence of New Imperial Powers, and I'm your favorite host, Mr. M. So this is for my AP students, Chapter 33, Imperialism. Hopefully we can get this done within the time limit. So here's our objectives: U.S. imperialism, Japanese imperialism. U.S. imperialism, like we said in class, hopefully you were there. It starts out way before this, but we'll go with this one. Okay, well, actually we won't. Okay, so it starts out with as soon as America is founded in 1783, when it's actually created with the Treaty of Paris, okay, in which the British gave over the territory. The colonists were fighting for the territory from the Atlantic to the Appalachians. Instead, they got from the Atlantic to the Mississippi, expanded the territory. Only problem with that is there's people living on the land they're called Native Americans, sometimes referred to as Indians, and so we're going to kick them out. And that starts with the Indian Removal Act of 1824, I think it was, somewhere around there, 1820 something. Check it out, but I think it's Jackson, and it's essentially pushing these people off the land. This is a clear form of imperialism. It continues with the 1804 purchase of Louisiana and people exploring the area, and then the Mexican-American War. Oh, I forgot the annexation of Texas and all this, and expanding the territory. This is all thrown into the element of manifest destiny. In 1823, we issued the Monroe Doctrine. And Monroe Doctrine is it's kind of like a statement by a little kid saying, parents, stay out of my room. You know, if the kid's like 5 or 4 years old, it's kind of cute and funny like that. If the dad still wants to go in the room, he just pushes the kid aside and goes in the room. It's a 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid. It's cute. That's all it is. So the Monroe Doctrine is kind of like that. It's telling the European powers, stay out of the Americas. We'll protect it. They can't really back it up. They can't really do too much, and the Europeans kind of, for the most part, ignore it, chuckle, oh, how cute. Okay, but this is going to be an entry into imperialism. It shows the intention that the Americans have. They want to be like the big boys, like Europe. So we'll move further. U.S. goes into chaos, civil war, or something like, and stuff like that. But then things start to expand with the purchase of Alaska from Russia. This is created by Secretary of State Seward, who sells it to the Americans by going, look, if we get Alaska, and then you go from America to Alaska, there's a big chunk of land in between. That thing's called Canada. Maybe we'll get Canada next. From the very beginning, America had intentions to acquire or make Canada part of their territory and area. We were stopped in the Revolution. We were stopped again in the Battle of 1812. And they still want it, and they think that's what's going to happen. So American Congress agrees to purchase Alaska, and that's, in a sense, a form of imperialism. We take this land that the Russians, they didn't have. They took it from the Inuit people, or the Eskimos, and they possess it. In 1875, we continue kind of this imperialistic vent, in the sense that we make Hawaii a protectorate. A protectorate is kind of just like reserving a spot. We say, hey, we're America, this is Hawaii, we're going to protect it from other groups. Not from ourselves, but from other European powers, with little consideration for the people. Well, lo and behold, Hawaii turns into a very profitable sugar plantation area. And you read about this in industrialization, bringing in people to work the fields and stuff to create lots of money from sugar. The Americans set up kind of policies that they followed with the Native Americans, where they have them sign contracts that they don't quite understand, and then essentially say, we have the right to the land because you screwed up. The Hawaiians understand this a little later, and Queen Luilekulani, probably didn't say that right, she starts to put 2 and 2 together and starts to foment kind of a insurrection or rebellion to kick out the Europeans, in particular Americans. The sugar plantation owners hear about this, and they go and complain to Congress. The president steps in, and then they put down the rebellion, lock up the queen, not in jail, but they kind of put her in house arrest, and she becomes powerless, and it's essentially the end of the Hawaiian dynasty, or the Hawaiian kingship. And then at that point in time, the United States makes it an official protectorate or territory of the United States. Alright, here's our big jump into becoming a real imperial power for the United States. So it's the Spanish-Cuban-American War, more commonly known as the Spanish-American War. Students, just so we don't do anything silly, this is not America fighting Mexico. That's the Mexican-American War. This is a Spanish-American War. Spanish versus Americans. Mexican-American War, Mexico versus Americans. Okay, so two different things. The war is over Cuba, and that's the essential start of it, but it's going to be the U.S. fighting Spain. What had happened is that Spain had lost most of its territories except for Cuba and Puerto Rico. They wanted to maintain those things. Those are the ones that they've had for quite a while. Just a mistake. And they're quite lucrative. In particular, Cuba produces a lot of sugar, tobacco, and something else. I can't think of what it is right now, but there's something there. Oh, coffee. So they want to hold on to that. The Cubans themselves, they want to have a revolution, and they claim that their revolution is very similar to the United States, and that they're the American group or American settler group, and they're trying to get rid of this oppressive European regime. They appeal to the United States for help. The Americans go, we don't want to get involved with Spain. That would be bad. We're not a strong power yet. Spain is, or Spain is considered a strong power, so they're cautious about getting involved. What they do is send a battleship down there to kind of keep an eye on things and say, look, don't mess with American stuff. There are American companies who run large sugar plantations in the areas. One of the ways that the Spanish try to control the revolution is to put a lockdown on the people in Cuba. They want to keep the people in the towns because their problem is that they're fighting rebels who are out in the countryside who run away into the wilds of Cuba. So you lock down the town, the people can't go out there. The problem is when you lock down the town, the sugar plantation owners can't get their workers. No workers, no sugar. No sugar, no money. The owners complain to the American government. The ship goes down there to protect interest, to keep things stable. We've talked about stability many times, to keep things stable. The ship all of a sudden blows up in Havana Harbor, and immediately in the newspapers it's run as USS Maine destroyed in Spanish Harbor. Spain suspected. And as soon as you throw that out, everyone thinks it's Spain, regardless of the true facts and stuff. It's found out later on in not too long ago, I think in the last 15 or 20 years, that it was actually blew up from the inside out, and therefore was probably a mistake with something too close to the boiler room. That's the engine room where they keep the fuel or something like that, and not a Spanish mine as suspected earlier. So anyways, it's a small mistake or a lie which creates a war. It's a very typical situation. With the battle ensues, U.S. Fights Spain, and they beat them up. They thought that this was going to take a while, take longer, and that Spain had more better forces, and it doesn't. Okay, they're able to quickly rout the Spanish Navy in Manila Harbor. Remember, Manila's in the Philippines. The U.S. had already sent ships that way before the war started, and so they catch them kind of a surprise and blow them up. Okay. In anticipation for the war, the U.S. had set up a deal with the Filipinos. Filipinos, native people who want their independence from Spain. If you help us fight the Spanish, we, at the end of the war, will grant you your independence. The Filipinos, yeah, dude, we'll take your help. And the war's over, the Filipinos had helped out, and they go, and where's our independence? And the U.S. goes, yeah, well, that's just not going to happen. We're going to keep possession of this territory. And there's a cool story. McKinley's praying at night, trying to figure out what to do, and then God speaks to him and says, you must keep them uplift and civilize these Filipinos, essentially saying that they can't run it on their own, and therefore the Americans need to show them the way, and America jumps in full force to imperialism. We need to dominate these people because they're incapable, and they need our help, even if it's not a good deal for them. The U.S. pattern of intervention shows up in many things, and it's not just the U.S. Remember, it's Britain, France, and all these people are doing it, but this is just to show that the United States is involved in imperialism. So they get involved in the Caribbean, Central American lands. They occupy at one time the Dominican Republic, which is the east side of the island, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Haiti. And Haiti is the left side of the island, or the west side of the island. So they get involved in these places to maintain stability. Remember, it's very important for businesses to have stability. Stable environments create more profit. The U.S. also gets involved in this place called Panama Canal. And this is a place where the French had earlier tried to build a canal to connect the Pacific to the Atlantic. The French had to stop because of a couple different issues, financing number one, and also because of the fact that malaria kept hitting their workers, and workers on malaria just don't work too well. Roosevelt wants to go in and do this stuff. Okay, the problem is that area of Panama is under, it's part of Colombia. So he helps to create a situation where he gets the Panamanians to separate from Colombia. They back up the revolution, Colombia has to back down, and all of a sudden Panama becomes a state. The rebels win. With that, the U.S. gets their agreement that, look, if we help you with your revolution, we'll build a canal there. You give us the land for the canal, and we'll help you with the revolution. So they get the canal zone. They build the Panama Canal. It takes quite a while. It is a major feat. It's a huge accomplishment. And now America has this canal zone. One more time, more American imperialism into this area. Towards the end of this, Roosevelt also throws out the Roosevelt Corollary. It's just a statement. It's an addition to Monroe Doctrine. In it, now it's kind of like, remember that little kid that the dad just batted out of the way to get into the room? Well, now the kid's like 17 years old. He's a big boy, he's been working out, he lifts weights, and he's fit. Well, you can't just throw him out the window. So now the U.S. is a real power, and they're up there with the groups in the world, like not equal with Great Britain, but definitely in the top 4 or 5. The Roosevelt Corollary also has an addition in it. It says that the U.S. gives themselves the right to intervene in the domestic affairs of any nations in which the U.S. is involved. In other words, if the U.S. business is going on in that country and there's an unstable environment or not a good one for business, the U.S. has a right to go down there and to make it right or to get involved to protect business interests. So here's our map of the United States imperial efforts. Here's Alaska, our first step, then Puerto Rico, second step. Here's Panama Canal, and then all these little dots that are springing up, these are just islands that are out there that are good for them to take possession of because they're stopping points for the ships. So it's clear that America is heavily involved in imperialism already by the late 1870s, and even, by the early 1900s and even more. Now we'll focus our attention on Japan. Japan is an interesting story. I anticipate them, the AP, having 1 or 2 questions on the multiple choice, and perhaps even a kind of how is Japan different or compare and contrast thing. So remember the Japan that we talked about 2 chapters ago, where they're basically taken over by European powers, and they can't do much because they're not together, and mainly because the Tokugawa shogunate has trying to maintain the old style. They were resistant to the European efforts. Well, they find out that they've fallen far behind. They had to sign the unequal treatments, and essentially they're kind of been imperialized. Well, they kick out the Tokugawa, they throw in a new Meiji restoration, they put the emperor in charge, and they start a massive modernization effort. These guys go crazy in a short period of time, in like 30 years or less. They get very, very fast, very, very modern, and very, very efficient. They build military, they make deals with the Euros to improve their military, to train their military, and they become a dominant group, especially the most dominant group in the East Asian continent for sure. By 1870, they're colonizing neighboring islands of Hokkaido and the Kuril Islands, and then Okinawa and Ryukyu in the south, and they're adding to their territory. By 1876, they have warships from Britain, and they use those as models to build their own warships, and then they start to dominate the Korean Peninsula that had been held by China for a long time, and Russia itself had visions of taking it over. Japan continues. Here's our map. They get involved in what's called the Sino-Japanese War, in which they beat up the Chinese and take another chunk of them and solidify their control for Korea. They call Korea an independent nation, but they're running it. And then in 1904-1905, they get involved in the Russo-Japanese War, and this is a big deal because Russia is considered a European power. Well, they just got beat by Japan, and everyone's like, dude, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because Japan went all full hog into modernization. They are a world power and start to spread into Southeast Asia and into East Asia. So they start to take parts and chunks of China, and you notice that there's some early dates like 1914 where they're involved in these areas. There's Korea where they get involved, and here's the islands that they take possession of, and over here. And they're vying for competition against Russia in this area. And we have finished a section. That is so awesome. With seconds spare, I'm done. See you later.